come in, but thank you. All right. Thank you for joining us for our workshop today on what to ask before you open your doors. Whether you have a startup or an existing business, your main goal is to grow your company. So if you're looking to lease a space, have questions on zoning and finance, we're here to help you. We're really happy to bring this to you, answer some questions you may have. Obviously, there's many more questions to ask before you can purchase commercial real estate or talk to a financial expert, but hopefully we can offer some answers to you on some of those questions today. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Empower and then Logan Square because we're really excited to partner and bring you this workshop today. Just a little bit about Empower. It's a community-oriented educational 501c3 non-for-profit, and it is dedicated to helping grow small businesses in the Chicagoland area. We provide resources, mentors, and any other pertinent information to those areas that are underfunded, underserved, under-resourced, and give them the opportunity to invest back into their neighborhoods, which helps them watch their business grow, helps them see their neighborhood foster economic growth, which is all good. So we have an amazing mentoring program that if you need any more information on that, we can put that in the follow-up. So I would love to introduce Nilda, who is the executive director at Logan Square Chamber of Commerce, who we are delighted to partner with today. So Nilda, tell us a little bit about what's going on at Logan Square and a little bit about you.
Hey, Patty. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Yes, my name is Nina Esparza. I've been here at the Logan Square Chamber of Commerce for 1 year and 6 months now. And back in September, we held a Take a Walk on Milwaukee initiative on Milwaukee Avenue between Diversey and Central Park. And we had about 200 potential entrepreneurs that came and picked up a map and walked along the 3-block stretch and viewed all of the vacancies that were out here. And since that event, 3 vacancies did fill. So we were very, very excited about that. And so we want to make sure that we continue to assist the neighboring businesses get more new neighboring businesses opening so that we have a robust corridor. And we're going to mimic this initiative at the rest of the service area in and around Logan Square, which is a 5-mile stretch.
I'm muted. You think that would end at some point, but awesome. Thanks, Nilda. And I just wanted to let everybody know that Nilda was part of the reason why we're having this workshop. She spurred this with our zoning committees with the SBAC and all the work we're doing on the Vacancy Fraud Act. So thank you, Nilda. And with that, I will introduce our presenters. They're going to tell you a little bit about themselves before we dive into the questions. So Katerina, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Katerina is from Birchwood Law.
Thank you. My name is Katerina Carrick, and I'm the founding attorney of a zoning and land use law firm called Birchwood Law. At Birchwood, we assist developers, property owners, and business owners in the real estate development world. We help clients remove zoning roadblocks on commercial, industrial, and residential projects. Specifically, we work on annexations, plan developments, zoning amendments, special use permits, variations, subdivision of land, and zoning litigation. I've practiced law in Illinois and Ohio, and throughout my career, I have represented local municipalities, developers, business owners. I work very closely with the community organizations, and zoning is incredibly challenging. It is challenging because of regulations, politics, and bureaucracy, and there's a need for balancing interest of the community with the interest of the property owner. On all of our projects, we work collaboratively to build consensus among the stakeholders and get clients' zoning entitlements approved in the most cost-effective and efficient manner.
Thanks, Katerina. And I will add that Katerina's been pretty instrumental on helping us on our zoning committee and getting all those laws and regulations looked at to see how we can make it easier for small businesses to operate. So thank you, Katerina. I appreciate it. And now Stephen Ball is from Byline Bank.
Oh, you just spoiled my whole introduction. No, Stephen Ball from Byline Bank. I've been a business banker for almost 30 years now, basically helping companies from startups to the first few $1 million in revenues, whether it's access to capital or movement of money or just advice along the way. I'm on the executive board of the Small Business Advocacy Council, as I always like to give back to the community that's given so much to me that I've been aiding over the years. And running business banking at Byline Bank just means I have a team of bankers out there ready to help business owners. I work with all the branches to make sure that if you're a business owner, we're just there to prove to people that bankers don't have to be scary or elitist, and we're approachable and answer any questions that you have along the way. Happy to help, and thank you for having me here today.
Thank you so much for being here, because I know we'll have a lot of financial questions. It tends to happen when we have a business workshop. So thank you. And last but not least, Tony Zioli from Freeborn and Peters. Welcome.
Hi, Tony Zioli from Freeborn and Peters. I'm a corporate and real estate attorney with Freeborn. I do a lot of work with small businesses, particularly startups and entrepreneurs. So happy to be here and help answer some questions about starting a new business in real estate.
Yeah, thank you. And again, thank you to all three of you. You guys are always super helpful for all the legislation we try and push through, and it's very much appreciated. And with that, I think we can dive right into the questions. And Kate or anybody else, if you have any questions that you want to ask, feel free to raise your hand. We can then come off mute. You can ask the question, then we can go from there in case we don't hit any that you want. But this is open. Don't feel like you have to wait to the very end. You can interject as much as you want and go from there. All right. So the meeting is being recorded, just because I know you came on just a little bit later. For anybody who came on later, the meeting's being recorded. We will have this on our website for you guys to view later as well, and maybe have a list of questions that you should ask prior to opening your business. All right. So this is going to be open. I'll ask the questions. Again, it will be a little more fluid, and whoever wants to pop up and give a chat, answer the question, feel free to, okay? I think the first question I'm going to ask is twofold. Why do you need a real estate attorney? And then how do you select a real estate attorney or an agent?
I can jump in with the first question, and hopefully I'll remember the other two. A real estate attorney can save you time and money and help set up your business for success. A real estate attorney, it's a very broad area of the law in and of itself, and there are many attorneys with specific areas of expertise within real estate. And that may include a transaction attorney, somebody who can assist with the sale and acquisition of real estate, review the title policy and exceptions from coverage, and negotiate those exceptions if needed. Also, an attorney, and this is very, very important, can negotiate a lease agreement on behalf of the tenant or the landlord. And it's, in my experience, I think it's very important to have a good real estate attorney assist at the beginning when you're considering engaging in a lease with a particular landlord. And it's your job as the business owner to set yourself up for success, and having a great real estate attorney review the lease and negotiate on your behalf. Perhaps identify potential problematic provisions within the lease is very important. Another thing that a real estate attorney can do is assist with the financing and represent the borrower on secured loan originations, construction loans, bridge loans, other types of loans. Another thing is joint ventures. If you're considering a partnership as part of your business, the structure and the negotiation aspect of that partnership agreement is very important. LLC operating agreements, they can assist with shareholder agreements and other forms of joint venture arrangements. Another thing that a real estate attorney can do is land use and zoning, which is what my firm does. And we assist with real estate development matters, whether the client needs a variation or a zoning amendment or a special use permit, that's something that a land use and zoning attorney would handle. Also litigation. If you are in a position where there's a dispute, you may consider hiring a real estate attorney to handle that litigation matter on your behalf. It could be regarding a title dispute, a breach of contract, code violation disputes. And I can't cover all of the things that a real estate attorney would do, but another thing is bankruptcy, restructuring, winding down, that sort of thing, foreclosures. That's all under the very broad umbrella of real estate. And like I expected, I forgot your other two questions.
That's okay. I mean, it leads right into it. So with all that, because there's a lot of information that somebody would need to know, how do you go about selecting the proper real estate agent or attorney for your business or for yourself? I mean, what knowledge, what skills does somebody need to know in order for you to say, this is the person I need to help me with this purchase? Yeah, so I guess I'll chime in here and just handle these two questions since they it segues into that. So I think with a real estate attorney, you want to do your research, talk to other business owners who are thriving, talk to members of your local chamber of commerce or the SBAC, find out who they worked with and get a recommendation from somebody that has worked with that attorney. Another thing that I would suggest if you're looking to lease real estate or buy real estate is to look at LoopNet or other online places where properties are listed and find out which agents, if you're considering engaging a broker or an agent, which agents have properties listed in the neighborhood that you're considering leasing in, and which agents or brokers specialize in your industry. I think those are the two most important things to consider outside of getting those recommendations. Okay, and Tony, I didn't know if you wanted to jump in because I know this is in your realm as well. So,
yeah, I mean, I'm not going to reiterate a lot of things that Katerina said, but I mean, in general, it's important to have a real estate attorney in these contexts because there is a lot of different things that go into these transactions that you're not going to know. No matter how good you are at your business, you're just not going to know. There are a lot of aspects related to it, and no lease is the same. I mean, there are forms they give you, but a lot of times they don't exactly work for what you need them to do for leases. Zoning in particular, it may not work for your particular use, and so on. So there are nuances to everybody's business that need to be considered when you look at these documents. And that's really the importance of getting a real estate attorney or an attorney in general. And when looking to find the right real estate attorney, real estate is a very big window. So someone to say they do real estate, particularly a small firm, they're probably good at the bulk of it. But when you're talking about specific things like zoning or financing, things like that, you want to make sure they have that particular expertise and that they actually do that on a regular basis. That is a different story in terms of what you're doing. So when you start with getting a lawyer, find somebody who is at least experienced in real estate that does that has that on their website as one of the services they provide. Specifically, when you start getting into nuanced things like zoning, you may need to talk to specialists.
I think we just realized you need a real estate attorney because you guys think of everything that we don't think about as the public along the way. And that's like just Katerina hearing her go. There are so many things I didn't think about from the banking end, the financing end. Make sure you get a commercial real estate attorney and a commercial realtor. I've seen so many times where it's a residential expert, whether it's attorney or realtor or agent, if you're looking to purchase, and they treat it like you're buying a home, and it's so much different along the way. The other thing I see is, I think Tony pointed out up front, I see I've had clients that they sign the purchase contract or sign the lease and then go to the attorney a little bit late at that point in time.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that. Thanks, David. One thing I definitely want to touch on, in my experience, a lot of these smaller entrepreneurs tend to look to family or friends or things like that. So they're kind of tangential real estate. It may work for the initial pass, maybe, but I don't recommend it, especially in a commercial lease setting. I mean, these are locked in obligations. You want to get somebody with experience to look at this and, like anything else involving a lawyer, it's, an ounce of prevention versus a pound of cure. You want to get it right at the outset because that's going to define your relationship for however many years you're in that lease. So you want to make sure it fits you right. And there are definitely differences between a residential real estate attorney and a commercial real estate attorney. These may seem like the same thing. They are worlds apart in terms of what they know about the different areas. So definitely make sure you're talking to a commercial real estate attorney if you're dealing with a commercial lease or any kind of commercial property acquisition, anything.
Great. I have a question that may pertain to that, and maybe this is just for clarification. So does it matter if you're looking for a commercial situation or a live work situation? Do those separate the person who you seek out as a real estate agent or attorney?
I think more the context, if you're going to be doing work and it ends up being, in order for it to do work, if you have work out of your house, for the most part, it's going to have to be some form of commercial space. Katarina might have better insight on that to begin with, but if it in any way touches commercial space, then they should be looking at commercial real estate attorneys, because most likely they are going to have commercial lease terms, which are way different than residential right terms. And the rights that a tenant has in residential are not even close to the ones that, commercial tenants have. They're not in any way synonymous. So you definitely want to make sure that you're looking at the right context.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Katarina, I'll let you respond if you have any info.
Sure. I think the live work situations are very tricky, and it depends on the zoning district and the type of use. If the property that you are considering is in a residential district and plan to have a home office, it really it depends on the type of use and the intensity of use. If it's more of a home office, it may be permitted as an accessory use. But if it's a home office where you plan to meet clients and it starts to look more like a commercial use, then you may actually run into zoning issues and may not be able to get a business license. So it's tricky, and I would caution anybody who's considering a live work situation to really do your due diligence on the front end to make sure that you have a clear understanding of what you're getting into and what's permitted and what's not.
Great, thank you. I know we've touched a lot or a little bit on zoning just right at the beginning. And I know that zones can be defined by single use or, through residential, industrial, and they can combine several compatible activities. So could you explain a little bit why zoning is so important? And we'll go a little bit more in depth in that type.
Sure. So just for those people who are not familiar with zoning as a concept, the zoning process, it starts with the due diligence stage, and every property has a designated zoning district. So it's incumbent upon the prospective tenant or property owner to figure out what your designated zoning district at the moment is, and then what it allows, what uses it allows. And after that point, you need to figure out what you would need to do in order to get approved if the use that you're proposing is not permitted. So that's kind of the stage one. And if you're just at the beginning and you're trying to figure out what your permitted uses are and what your designated zoning district is, two really helpful resources are if you're in the city of Chicago or the properties in the city of Chicago, is the city's GIS map, which has all of the zoning districts within the city identified on a map. It's not the most user-friendly thing in the world, but it is what we have, and it does contain the information that you would need to start your due diligence. And then the other thing is to consider looking at the Chicago zoning ordinance number 17-3-0207, and that there's a table there that contains all of the B1 through B3 and C1 through C3 uses that are either permitted or require a special use permit or are not permitted. So you can use that as an initial guide to give you an idea, a better understanding of what uses are permitted within that, within the district that the property you're considering is zoned for, and what uses are permitted there. And then I think as part of the second, once you've figured that out and done your due diligence, it's really about assembling your team. If you need a zoning variation or an amendment, finding an architect, finding a zoning attorney, civil engineer, if you're thinking of doing structural alterations that require an engineer. And then the last step is to actually submit a zoning application and go through the process. And there's usually an application fee. There is a legally required notice to all of the neighbors, property owners within 250 feet of the property. And you would go through a staff review process with the city of Chicago, where the staff looks at the application and they give you comments, whether they would agree with the change or not. And in the city of Chicago, there is a alderman prerogative or privilege. So you would meet with the local groups and your alderman's office and present your application and try to get their recommendation and approval. And then you would go through the city's process, whether it be with a quasi-judicial, quasi-legislative, or an administrative agency, just depending on what kind of an application it is. And hopefully at the end of it, you end up with the approval. So it's a cumbersome process. I always tell people to try to find properties that are already zoned for your needs. If you can find that, it saves you so much time and money. But if you're not able to find that, just make sure you understand the costs and the time that's involved in undertaking a zoning application.
And I was just gonna say, it sounds a little complicated. So I'm just wondering, is it easy for a new business owner to navigate that process, or would it be best for them to enlist somebody to help them out?
Well, it depends. It depends on the kind of application that they need. If it's a zoning application, and I usually recommend hiring an attorney. It is a cumbersome process. But if the change that the business owner needs is, fairly minor, there are minor adjustments that could be requested from the zoning administrator's office. And I think it's possible to handle that on your own, especially if you are working with another design professional who has experience. But the minute it gets complicated, usually what tends to happen is people run to the zoning attorney. But it's good to know what you're getting into right off the bat. It's good to engage the community, the neighbors, and make sure that they are aware and they're supportive. It makes it a lot easier, and the elected officials are generally inclined to support projects that the community's behind.
Great. And for anybody who's, I'm sorry, go ahead, Tony.
No, I was just going to add a little bit for those that are less, familiar with the whole zoning thing. I think Katerina summed it up as best as she can. It's a very complicated procedure. Commercial space is not commercial space. There are multiple designations of commercial space and what uses can be permitted in commercial space and so on. I don't particularly think it is the most user-friendly thing for a normal layman to find out what uses of a property is. I've always found out, and this may, lead into one of your questions later, of the importance of getting a commercial broker involved. But a commercial broker can usually help weed out spaces that are at least in the zones where your use is generally permitted. And then at least you take some of the onus off trying to find a property and then see if it works for you. What you want to do is find the areas that work for you, then find a property that works within that. If you're doing something in particular that relates to a unique use, education, vice industries, restaurants, alcohol, cannabis, any of those types of things, medical, any of these more unique ones, then you definitely want to get tailored into what locations you're going to be, because they're a very even smaller subset of the locations you can be. And I don't think Katerina stressed it enough. You really want to try to avoid finding a space that you have to go and get changed your zoning. In the instances that I've done this is an extremely long and complicated process. And you definitely shouldn't be taken by layman, should be taken by attorney, because there are lots of things involved. You have to talk to the alderman. You have to get the neighborhood involved, approval. You have to, in many cases, change the property, improve the property, get a certain amount of parking involved, and so on. There's a lot of different things depending on the use. So as much as humanly possible, and especially now where there's a lot of vacancies, do your best to avoid finding a space and trying to make it work for you in zoning wise. Find an area where the zoning works for you, then find a space in that area. You're going to be much happier at the end of the day, and your lawyer bill is going to be a lot less.
Great. I do have a question in the chat. So Kate, you can feel free to unmute yourself, but she does have a question on sales tax collection zones. So I don't know if you want to ask it, you want me to ask it for you? Feel free to unmute yourself. Her question is, in her current location, she collects 10.25% in sales tax and is outside the zone for additional city taxes. So she wants to know, how does she find out the sales tax collection zones for a new business location?
That I'm not, I'm not up on sales tax. Unfortunately, I can't answer that question. You should be, I mean, any commercial real estate attorney, but I wouldn't say any commercial real estate. I'm a commercial real estate attorney. I still don't know. Yeah, I would start with checking with the Secretary of State or the Department of Treasury and finding out through there what they probably have some information on what the zones are. I don't know offhand, unfortunately.
I don't have the answer, unfortunately, either, but another thing to consider is perhaps giving a call to the Business Affairs and Consumer Protection office. They have a small business advice center there, and they may have a map or some more information that's helpful. That would be a good starting point.
Yeah, the taxing authorities are usually helpful because that just means you want to pay taxes. So they're usually helpful finding you what taxes you have to be paid. So they're more than happy to help when you call them up and say, well, what taxes do I owe? They're, oh, sure, we'll show you. So, call the department, especially depending on the county. Like if it's Cook County, you could probably contact the Cook County Treasurer. If you want to start at the Secretary of State level, you could probably start there because it relates to your business license and sales tax issues. But I would just get granular to wherever the county is first. That's probably your easiest in life for that.
Thumbs up. All right. I'm going to jump into a different sort of question as far as if you have your landlord and you have your space and you want to improve your space, can you get them to pay for some of that? Is there anything in particular you need to know as far as improving that space? Did you guys hear me? I'm not sure if I froze. Okay.
Oh, I heard you. I'll start this one. I mean, again, this is the importance of why you want a commercial real estate attorney up front, because they're going to negotiate the improvement budget then. That's when you should be negotiating the improvement budget. It's all about incentive. They want to incentivize you to get on the property. Once you've signed the lease, they're not incentivized to do improvements. So why would they? You can probably make improvements, but again, that has to be built into your lease, what improvements you can be made and what approvals you need. Again, more importance of getting the lease right. If you know that you're going to be making improvements to the property, you want to make sure that that's spelled out in the lease and that you don't need further consent by the landlord, because if it's not written that way, you're going to have to go to the landlord for every improvement, and then they could or not say yes or no. And then if they say no, then there's no appeal for it. It's a no. So if you know you have to do these improvements up front, all the more reason why you want all of these issues negotiated ahead of time. And then at that point, but particularly today when there's a lot of vacancies, there's probably a lot of leverage that credible business tenants have to negotiate tenant improvement allowances where the landlord will pay a portion of the improvements for the property. Again, relating to more reason why you would want to use a commercial broker, because they understand the leverage that you have. They understand the way to negotiate those things. A layman probably doesn't understand how to work that stuff into a lease or to negotiate the tenant improvement allowance at the outset. So that's why you want the professionals. But at the outset, I can't stress this enough. That's when you need to negotiate all this. When you need to negotiate what improvements you intend to be made for it, what consents are required, and what, if anything, the landlord is going to give you in terms of a tenant allowance for it. Oh, one other thing to remember, if you're building something particular into the property, let's say like a dentist office or whatever, and you're building heavy equipment, there's going to be a ton of equipment into the property that's built into the property, you definitely want to make sure you get written into the lease who owns that property when it's over, because normally if it's built into the property, it's attached to the property, most likely the landlord takes ownership of that because you built it into the foundation of the property. So if you're intending to take that stuff back with you, all of that needs to be, again, worked out on the outset, or you're going to have nothing but problems at the end.
Great. So when you're also talking to your landlord, I assume you want to know and have this business plan up front of when, how long, any particular questions that anybody should ask as they ask their landlord besides, I need it for this long, this is my build out, and any other thing that we spoke about, the things that you just mentioned?
Anything you can think of. What do I owe as far as taxes, if anything? Who's paying for utilities? Are the utilities separately metered so that I get a separate bill? Do I have to do that on my own? What hours can I have people on? What signage can I do on your building? Is it internal signage? What exterior signage can I do? What approvals do I need to start doing that? What are my parking availability? How many spaces do I have? Are these reserved for me or my clients, my customers, or are they open to anybody in this parking lot if it's more than one unit?
Do you need to ask if you can renew, or is that just understood that you have that option?
You definitely don't have you don't have an automatic option to renew. So if you want some kind of auto option to renew, not auto option, but the ability to renew, you want to build that in up front. So if say you want to like a first right of refusal to renew, then you want to talk and negotiate that up front. So yeah, lots of different things. It's a lot tailored. I'm just rambling things off my head because a lot of it is tailored to the particular use of the property for that particular tenant. Like a restaurant has different needs than a medical space and has different questions you would ask. Like a dentist's office is going to ask what the plumbing situation is, where a restaurant is going to ask more what the parking situation is. And so it's just, it's a lot to do with the intended use of the space. So you want to make sure that, again, the person you're getting to negotiate these, whether it's a broker or an attorney, understands your intended use really, because they will know the questions to ask in terms of what they should be asking the landlord up front, at least the official ones.
So, and I assume a landlord will also ask you if you have funding in place initially and how you're going to pay for it to start.
They run credit check. Every landlord is different. Smaller landlords are much different than big tenant landlords, and everybody else can chime in. But they run credit checks. They run generally lien checks if they're doing the right thing. If they're intended to take some type of security, they may ask for a guarantor if the particular business is either not significantly revenue generating right now, or they think there's any kind of hiccup with their financials. They may have a separate guarantor for the landlord. But yeah, they want some evidence that you're going to be able to pay for the lease up front. So they're going to ask for some form of financials. And if you can't get to their level of comfort with those financials, they're going to ask for a guarantor. And it's usually a personal guarantor.
Yeah, I've seen them ask for a big deposit too, or they ask for what's called a letter of credit, which seems like just a letter from the bank, but really that's your cash in the bank that the bank's now promising the landlord will pay if you don't. So I've seen that as well.
And then, Stephen, do you also need any other additional information? Maybe, I don't know, a letter of good standing besides that letter of credit? Is that what a letter of good standing is?
No, the letter of credit is really, it's an official negotiable instrument where I'm holding money at the bank and I have to make payment if the landlord comes and proves A, B, and C are met. So if the landlord comes and shows that you didn't pay rent, now they know they at least have a month or several months or whatever amount there. It's one of the more expensive things to get at the bank, but it's instead of letting the landlord hold your money, it all comes down to, as Tony was pointing out, credit check. And is your business new? Has it been around for a while? Is it a small landlord versus a large landlord? And quite frankly, I've seen large landlords and large businesses where the large business still needs a letter of credit. So it's just one of those things that are out there that you're probably talking more of like a credit reference with the bank. A landlord might come and I could say this business has been around for a while. And if we know the business, certainly we could talk to them, provide them with some information upon the business's approval. But a new business doesn't have that. right? It's a risk for the landlord.
So when you say it's one of the more expensive things to get at the bank, what does that mean?
I mean, just for the bank to kick out what sounds like just a letter, I mean, it could cost you a point on the money plus fees. And if the landlord wants to hold 10,000 and you say I'm going to go to the bank, it could cost you $1,200. And I know that's more than a point, but there's basic fees on a letter of credit. I mean, the banks hold capital against it. It's a true negotiable instrument. It's not the easy way to not give the landlord cash to hold. But none of us want our landlords to hold the cash. We'd rather have the cash in our names in the bank. It's just, what's the size of the letter of credit versus, the risk of having the landlord hold some money.
So and I'm just going to continue on this train. So when they're presenting a business to you, as far as funding and how they can get information, what information do they need to present to you in order to, if they need funding, what information do they need to present? A business plan? Do they need a marketing plan? Do they need their profit and loss? What do they need?
But before you go past the financing thing, I just want to touch on one.
Tony.
Reminded me, one of the things to watch out for with the landlord when they are, talking about financing and stuff is business interruption insurance. Some landlords will try to push you to get business interruption insurance if they think that they're not going to get their money, and then name them as an additional insurer for that business interruption. It means for whatever reason your business goes down, you have this insurance policy where you're supposed to get paid X amount of the revenues you were. This is an expensive insurance policy. It's not a cheap one. And in many cases, some businesses aren't even eligible to get it. So if you got to watch out if this is a requirement from a landlord and see if this can be negotiated out so you can avoid that additional significant expense.
And that's a really important thing to mention, especially in the last 2 years, what happened. I think that's a really key factor, because whatever you think is not going to happen could very well happen, like it did for the last 2 years. So thanks for highlighting that. All right.
Honestly, most of those policies didn't even cover COVID. So
right, because I know it didn't cover a pandemic.
Yeah. They didn't think of a pandemic largest since the Spanish plague.
Pandemic would happen.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, Patty, you probably asked the question. It could be a whole nother webinar in and of itself, funding for a business. I'll give you a couple points, a couple things that I've seen. One thing it's very, very hard to do is buy the property, buy the building when you're also starting a business. A lot of people say, I want to get that building, I want to build equity right away, but what does the bank have to go on? It's like buying a house without a job at that point in time. When you're talking about capital for a business, capital for a startup business, it's going to be very, very difficult at any bank. There's really not much to underwrite. Most banks, including mine, want to see 2 years in business. And then depending, like we have a scored product. If your credit score is good, you've been in business for 2 years, you can get money, and we're not going to ask what it's for. It's just a percentage of revenue. Under 2 years in business, it's generally community development centers. I know we fund. I think I see PNC on the phone. I'm sure they fund Allies for Community Business, which used to be Axion Chicago. But just like the Sears Tower in Comiskey Park, they keep changing the names of businesses that have been around forever. But they're out there doing microloans for even startup businesses, for individuals with low credit scores. The business plan shows the bank you know what you're talking about, but it still makes it very, very tough, even with small business administration programs, SBA programs, to get startup capital. And unfortunately, it's just the actuarials will tell you how hard it is for a business to survive past the first 2 years, first 3 years. So we have options and we have community partners, but I can't specifically tell you globally what someone would need coming in. But if you have a business that's already been around, it's financials, it's a personal financial statement, it's tax returns generally, unless it's one of the scored products that many banks have out there, in which case, if you have a good credit score and you have 2 years in a business, generally 15% of revenues you can get really quickly.
And I'm sure all of you can help direct somebody into what exactly they need for opening a business and what is going to help them get that, and whether they can afford it or not. I assume that's what you do anyway.
Yeah, of course. And it's just a level of service and how many resources the banks dedicate to small business owners, whether it's someone like myself and other people I know in the industry that are willing to talk a business owner through, because it's not just yes or no, it's generally why and what you need to do to get to that point. And I find that's the most important thing along the way.
And then because we're talking about these financial experts, what do you think they should look for? What's the most important thing in picking and solidifying their relationship? What
Generally,
experience, what skills? Same thing I asked, for the real estate. Sorry.
Yeah, no, generally I think first names that are spelled uniquely and last names that are a noun are best when it comes to, no. If it was me and I was coming, I'd like to know the tenure of a banker. I want to make sure if a banker's jumping every 2-3 years, I definitely say you're banking with the banker, not the bank. As soon as you're banking with the bank, you stand at risk because then you're a number. And if the bank changes policies, if you're banking with a banker, you find someone you trust that you could talk to that tells you the whys, you're in much better shape. I have customers I worked through, 9/11, and then I worked through the 2008 recession, and guess what? Profitability was way down, and I worked through COVID, and we never pulled their money away. We never walked away from them. So I think that's really important. And base your banking decision based on how big your business is compared to the bank. So make sure the bank focuses on what your business does and the size of your business. Be comfortable with your bankers. See if they've been there a while. Now, I just went to Byline in July, but it's the second time I wrote a resume in 30 years. So that's my backup there. I was at one bank for 14 years, one bank for 14 years. So something like that I'd be looking for. And then just get along. You should be open and honest with your banker, just like with your attorney. It's got to be someone you like doing business with on top of all the qualifications.
And I think that's probably the key takeaway. Relationship is key. You're banking with a person, not the firm necessarily. So that's really important. I will open it up if anybody has a question. I do have one last question, and that is really, are there any programs, city programs, state programs out there that can help someone finance signage or finance their business or improvement on the storefront or anything like that? And I know that's probably more Tony and Katerina, but that's open to you all. And Nilda.
Yeah, Patty, I would say that one of the key questions to ask a property owner is if their property sits on a TIF zone so that folks can access, there's money there for build out that a business owner can take advantage of. So that's a good question to ask.
Awesome.
Yeah, there's an ever-changing array of different programs that can be available to small businesses, either new ones, ones in need, and so on. So there's no one way to narrow it down, but you would look to the Small Business Administration, to the local, the city, state, county levels for any kind of grant programs, loan programs, where your space is. That would be the best place to start doing that. It's as simple as a Google search really to start that stuff, but it's ever changing. So you should always be looking for free money. On the other end, if yours is something you believe you have enough traction on or could get enough traction on, there are other ways to raise startup funds like Kickstarter and Indiegogo, where they're not, these are people who are giving you money without a return to it. There's more to it to that, but there's money to be had to start your business that way too. So there are a lot of different options to at least get a portion of the startup capital you need from different state and federal programs, as well as from different types of crowdfunding.
Great. And Lisa, you can unmute yourself and ask your question as well, if you'd like.
Oh, thank you. So are you finding that there are any particular trends in industries or businesses that are opening up now than before?
In terms of the types of businesses or just?
Yes.
I'm not seeing a trend in terms of businesses opening. I'm seeing, obviously there's a trend to there being a lot of available space. So that's more the reason why you should be, if you're opening a business, talking to the right people to leverage that power that you have, because this is probably a once in a lifetime leverage that commercial tenants have. But I'm not seeing a particular trend in businesses opening or trying to open.
Yeah, Lisa, we've seen a little bit of everything. Like some of the grand openings that we've participated here in Logan Square in the last year and a half have been anything from thrift shops to coffee shops to, let's see, we did a grand opening for therapeutic, services. And what else? We just did it was a beauty salon, aesthetic for, eyebrows and things like that, like a facial location on Armitage there this past weekend. So we've seen a little bit of everything To be honest, I know that the service industry was hit, very harshly with the pandemic, but we do still see restaurants that are opening in our area, popping up here and there. So it's been interesting to see. We have an insect asylum that'll be opening up pretty quick.
What?
So that's an insect asylum.
What is that?
For crazy bugs.
It is an insect museum. So it's there's a little bit of everything happening here.
Wait, no, what is an insect asylum? I need to know.
Cockroach in a straitjacket.
It is a museum that showcases, I think the owner said she has over 200 species of insects.
Wow.
All right.
That's interesting.
Every day. So there you go.
Yeah.
And Lisa, I'm gonna talk a little bit about it just as far as size of businesses, just because GoDaddy did a survey last year on what businesses are opening and what we've seen after the pandemic and how it's growing. And it's been mostly micro businesses had like a 32% increase. So the smaller businesses have been the ones that have said, I'm leaving my big job, I'm coming to start my own job. So, and I can share that with you, but it was a really pretty interesting study.
Yeah, to your point and to Nilda's point, it's almost funny. It's like I'm digging holes in the sand between the tides, right? We know a lot of businesses faced some damage during COVID or went out of business, but people still want to go out. People still like to do business out there. People still have, whether it's just thrift store or the restaurant, I see bars. I mean, those vacancies will slowly fill as people use them as with the good real estate attorney and negotiations for leases, they're able to go in there and fill because there's still demand out there as we leave our homes.
Great, thank you.
I would just quickly jump in and a sort of a nod to Nilda in your local chamber. If there's a local chamber, that's one of the first places I would go as a new owner, because they have so much information about what's happening, and particularly about all the programs from this city in particular that may be able to help.
Yeah, and I was going to say, Nilda, if you have information on like what you see is available and as far as zoning, so people wouldn't have to rezone, what's available in your chamber area in Logan Square?
Yeah, so we actually have someone here at the office just solely designated to help identify grants and resources for our businesses, and then we pass it on to our network. But the city of Chicago will be, the state will be funding the B2B programs again, so that's going to be accessible to folks. There's a lot of other stuff that came out of this session that's going to bring, they just haven't solidified it, but there will be some funding coming in for the small business community. Some of the things that we're doing on the chamber side, for instance, we understand that, the service industry, we had many grants that came out to help that industry, but no one really thought about our retailers. Everybody was hit hard. So this year we're taking out a blanket permit to do sidewalk sales in the summer to help ignite that foot traffic. From what I've gathered, they were pretty big here in Logan Square a couple years ago. So I kind of want to reignite that. So we're just trying to, figure out different ways to keep things going and to keep igniting foot traffic.
Great. And I will add on to the legislation piece as far as anybody who's starting a new business and if they are looking for employees, there is legislation that we're hoping to push through that when you hire a second chance citizen, somebody who's been incarcerated before, that training you can write off as a credit and get a tax credit when you file. So it's really important to understand all the legislation, jump on the SBAC site and see where you can really help yourself by helping somebody else. So and then we will hand out, just so you know, we're going to wrap it up at 7 because I know it's late and it's on Zoom. So it's not as interactive as far as everybody talking at once, which is great. I love Zoom for that reason. But I did want to let everybody know we will send out everybody's information so you can contact these 3 amazing people, and especially Nilda, if you have information or if you have questions on Logan Square in particular, feel free to reach out to them, and I'm sure they will be happy to respond as well. So I just want to thank you all for being here. Go ahead, Stephen.
Which one of us isn't amazing? I count 4 with Nilda.
That was
Nilda.
Scott. I was gonna say and Scott.
I was going to say there's 5 with Scott and there's 6 with you. We got a bunch here, Patty.
Oh, I didn't include myself. I said 3, meaning you 3.
Nilda,
Tony,
amazing.
not
Katerina,
Steven,
amazing.
Nilda.
Tony, amazing. That leaves me out, but I'm okay with that.
3 amazing presenters, Nilda, and our moderator chat guy who won't go on. So,
I'm
but I
just not
really
that
do.
significant.
Yeah, I really do. Thank
But
you all
amazing.
for being here. And I hope you got some valuable information. I know, Kate, you did. So thanks for asking the questions, everybody. We'll have this on recording so you can actually go back and look, especially since Katerina and Tony and Stephen rattled off a whole bunch of questions you should ask. So it's something that we're going to try and put down on a piece of paper so everybody has this going forward as well. And we will look forward to doing another one.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. And again, if you have any questions here after, feel free to send them to me and I can present them to these guys as well. And maybe we can get your answers that way. All right. Thank you all. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Bye.
Bye.